Welcome to our next session, how community leaders can promote information and stop misinformation. I'm Matthew Owen, the Director of Operations for the Intelligent Community Forum. In today's session, we'll be speaking with a social media and digital marketing consultant on how to effectively communicate via social media, including during times of crisis when we need to reach out to our citizens most urgently. We'll also be speaking with the Public Relations Director from one of our Smart 21 communities of 2021 to learn how they utilize their social media to engage with citizens, and particularly how that went during the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me first is social media and digital marketing consultant Nicola Dirksen. Nicola is an economics graduate from the University of Calgary who worked in the banking sector before transitioning into the economic development world. From there, she decided to combine her education and passions and entered into the world of social media and digital marketing. She's used various digital platforms to work with different centers to ensure that they were engaging with their citizens and business owners as best as possible, including her work with the 2019 Top 7 Intelligent Community Abbotsford's Economic Development Team, where she established their social media platforms specifically geared at targeting local businesses and connecting them to available resources. She believes that social media allows for messages and information to be shared to the masses. And when it comes to communities and information dissemination, she believes that this can be imperative for the local economy. Nicola, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for inviting me.
So first, can you give us a little bit of background about your experience with social media, especially as it concerns communities, because that's why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I totally nerd out over social media. Just need to start there. And it actually started with my work with a community, the City of Abbotsford Economic Development Team, and really progressive organization who, ICF members, and they, top 21, all that Smart 7, we went all the way. But I definitely liked working with the group in social media. It was a key component to two factors of economic development. So we like to use the platforms for one, so BR&E, which makes a lot of sense in my opinion. This is a fantastic opportunity to share resources to local businesses, also showcase what the communities are offering local businesses. But it's very strategic now with the reach that social media has, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, of course. It's an investment attraction tool. So we used it strategically in two different areas with the City of Abbotsford, and obviously in other communities too. But that's definitely how I would position what we used our social media for.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And it's really got such an immense economic development capability that I think is often ignored. And I would love to talk to you about that later, because I feel like that would be a wonderful conversation on its own. But today, really, our focus is about information, right? Sure. And keeping your communities informed, especially in times of crisis, as we've all been dealing with for the past year. And really, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of that, I do want to ask you about where you think normal citizens are getting their information. Where do you think social media ranks in relation to television, newspapers, word of mouth, just on how people are learning about what's going on in their communities? And I'm really talking more about local news issues, not necessarily the national news, but what's going on in town.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good question. So this could be considered generational. First and foremost, some people still feel more comfortable with traditional methods, like you mentioned before, but I think I can at least speak to myself and other people I've worked with. Throughout COVID, we were all on our computers, we were all on our phones, and we were receiving a lot of live updates from our local governments on what was happening and what was being offered and what was taking place within their communities. So I do feel social media plays a crucial role in information dissemination. And I know people get nervous about that. I know, fake news, we've all heard the term, but when it comes to a government's ability, I'm in Alberta, and where I live in a smaller city, it was crucial. So every day, I just remember back, early March, we didn't know school closures. We didn't know capacity levels. And it was an amazing way for people to receive that information from where they were looking. Like, let's face it, that's we're on our phones all the time now. We're on our tablets. It's just the way of life. It's a lifestyle. And it was a really great way to receive constant updated information, especially because I really do feel for myself, things were changing so frequently. So it was a really good opportunity for the government to connect with such a large reach and share what they were doing and what was happening, and maybe some things that we could do to help ourselves.
And you said something in your response that brings up something else I want to get into. You talked about how people are saying things are fake news, right? Then
Sure.
there's that whole distrust and misinformation that's flying around. So, obviously, it becomes increasingly important for communities to not only establish themselves as sources of information, but make sure that the messages they're trying to get through actually get out there and get to the people, because while it's great that you can reach your citizens directly on their phone, there's 19,000 other things sending messages as well. So how can they do this? How can they both build that trust, but then also really make sure that their messages get in front of people?
That's a fantastic question. This is a really amazing opportunity for traditional marketing methods to marry with modern digital marketing. So I know I've seen billboards, buses, even just like print advertisement on the sides of buildings, where the city, specifically if we're speaking about municipalities, are actually sharing their platforms that citizens can follow to ensure that they're getting accurate, up-to-date information. And then it's kind of at the other end. So this is a supporting role. This is where digital marketing gets to support those traditional methods, and they get to share, obviously, the information, but more importantly, what I find is they can do it faster, right? Like Facebook, you can post faster on Facebook than you can print a newspaper. So I feel like it works almost twice as hard. So they work really well together. But then once you actually are driving citizens to the appropriate channels, which is important, like you said before, but once you get them there, this is where you get to utilize the ability to share 24/7. This is where you get to capitalize on the fact that it is something you can constantly update and you can engage. That's a word I really want to encourage communities that are listening. The engagement portion of social media is what takes information dissemination to a platform where people and businesses feel connected. And I think that's the supporting role. So people can ask a question. You can't ask a newspaper a question. So people, maybe the wording, they weren't able to really understand the wording. This is a fantastic opportunity for them to say, what is capacity at the post office? And someone can answer. Or, when is that mask mandate changing? Someone can answer. So I feel like they really support one another. I hope that answers your question, but I feel like they really do support one another. And at least with digital media, they have the opportunity to then answer any questions that people might have specifically.
And yeah, I mean, the engagement is huge. And for anyone who's watching this now, who might have missed our session earlier today with Doug McCullough from Dublin, Ohio, that's called Social Media is a Two-Way Street, definitely go back, watch the archive video of that, because that is all about how to engage with your community, how to read sentiment all throughout social media usage. So definitely go ahead and check that one out. But I want to get back to what you were talking about in terms of the benefit, Nicola, of social media in terms of the speed in which it can respond to things, whether that could be, some sort of natural disaster and how you can kind of rapidly be getting information out there about safety and where shelter is, something like that, or if it's something with COVID and you're sending out information on new developments in terms of learning how it is and isn't spread, or where vaccine sites are, or where testing sites are, and all of that. That's great. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about stopping misinformation. Is speed the way to do that? That you need to just respond to these things quickly and squash any rumors? How do you deal with misinformation on social media?
There's 4 things that I keep in mind before every post. And it's cultural thing that I use with my clients and with my accounts, and things to keep in mind to ensure that that's happening, to ensure that your messages are being heard how you want them to be, is consistency, transparency, accountability, and responsiveness. So if you keep these 4 things in mind when you're posting, you are able to ensure that you are providing the most up-to-date information at that time. That being said, in my opinion, the beauty behind digital marketing is you can own a mistake. You can own a change. You can own hey, actually, now we're doing this. It's social. Like, there's a reason it's called social media. You're supposed to be able to be adaptive and responsive. And just like us, the people operating the accounts, the people interacting with the accounts, the best part about social media is that you are able to adapt that way. And keeping those 4 things in mind is crucial. That's actually how I believe you are able to share very reliable information, and your followers will recognize that. They will recognize that your messaging follows those rules, and you will create this trust with them because of that.
All right, I want to say those 4 things. That was amazing. I want to say those 4 things one more time, because I want to make sure everyone gets that, because I feel like that's something you got to take away from this. It is consistency,
transparency, accountability, and
responsiveness. All right, I love it. Consistency, transparency, accountability, and responsiveness. Finally, our last question, and I want to get a little bit more general with it. There are a lot of communities out there, especially those smaller rural communities, that might have virtually no social media presence or none at all. What would be your advice on the first steps they can do to get themselves out there, besides calling you?
Well, thank you. But honestly, I think creating a social media strategy, which is very similar to a communication strategy in the sense that you are going to create goals for what your accounts are. So create some intentions. So yes, we can go back and reiterate those 4 things that I mentioned before, but I think the first things first is just understanding that these are a communication tool. So what is your goal with those tools? And I wouldn't recommend it being followers. I wouldn't recommend it being, the goal isn't to go viral. I'm sure we've all heard that term. The goal for a community should be, this is an excellent way to share exactly what makes us unique. This is where we get to showcase what makes us special. This is the fun part. This is why you should want to move here, why you should want to open your business here, why you should want to do business here. This is what we have going on. This is our roots. This is how you showcase your story. So it is an opportunity for you to take advantage of all the fun tools and unique qualities, the lives and the events and the reels, all the fun stuff that everybody's doing right now, but with a goal. So if you're just getting started, create a social strategy. What are we going to do with this? Who's our target audience? Same questions, right? Like, they're very common questions, but then you can actually create your captions. You can gear your imagery. You can have a plan for how you post it. And, a lot of people ask the question, should I be on Facebook, or does it make sense for me to be on Twitter? I could pro and con all of them all day long, really, but it doesn't make sense unless you're going to use them consistently. Back to that word. So if you only have the manpower for 1 or 2, you need to pick one and just be consistent. And that's how I would highly recommend it. There's an opportunity for you to showcase things happening within your organization to encourage more people to come and interact with you, showcase your expertise. And that's what I would very much recommend using these platforms for.
Well, some fantastic advice there. I love the information about not necessarily trying to go viral and get followers, because I feel like that's the first thing a lot of our minds are going to go to when we enter into the social media realm. But you're right, especially if your community, you're not necessarily trying to go viral, because I feel like a lot of the times it's not going to be for good things. But Nicola,
usually not.
Thank you so much.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely, go ahead.
And one more thing that I actually really encourage a community to do, especially when they start to consider amalgamating traditional print marketing, the bus stops and the billboards like we mentioned before, is considering a hashtag. So this is something that we've all heard. This is something that a lot of people are already doing. But the thing with a hashtag is, traditionally they are a search mechanism. That's what they're used for. But they also create a sense of unity. So if you start to utilize this hashtag, your citizens will start to look for it. One, they're going to start to look for it. That's how you create that credibility, and they're going to start to use it. So it's a way for you to track and interact with who's using it. And you can be fun, you can be clever and all that good stuff. But I do recommend creating a community hashtag and encouraging your citizens to use it. Special event hashtags, things like that. Those are little tricks that I do feel have been successful, especially during COVID-19. It is, if you create a hashtag and people know that with that hashtag, they're going to find the most up-to-date information on behalf of your account, they're going to use it. And it's just the way that we utilize these tools and platforms. And it's a really great way to get the community involved and encouraging them to communicate with you that way.
Well, fantastic, Nicola. And thank you so much for sharing this insight and joining us today for the program. Unfortunately, it is all the time we have now, because right now we're going to be heading to our next guest, Cassio Ferreira, who is the Public Relations Director for the city of Curitiba in Brazil. It's one of our Smart 21 communities of 2021. Nicola, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Matt.
And joining me now is Cassio Ferreira, the Public Relations Director of the Curitiba City Council. Cassio Ferreira has a degree in social communications from the Pontifical Catholic University of Paraná, a postgraduate degree in digital media, and an MBA in marketing from the Federal University of Paraná. He has been working for 7 years in the public sector with social media and currently directs the public relations sector of the municipality of Curitiba. Cassio, welcome.
Hello, Matt. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
And thank you for making the time to join us. So first, I guess, tell us a little bit more about what you do for the city of Curitiba and how long you've been working there. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
I'm responsible for the public relations department of the City Hall of Curitiba. I'm director of the sector. My team and I produce the content that is posted on social media. I have been working on for a little over 4 years at the City Hall.
So I'd like to get a little bit into how you've communicated with your citizens throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about what you're currently dealing with when it comes to COVID-19? Do you have a lot of cases? Are people getting vaccinated? Are they doing lockdowns currently in your community? What's going on?
We are living day after day. At this moment, we depend on vaccines arriving in our city so that the long-awaited economic recovery can take place. At this moment, we have already vaccinated more than 700,000 people with the first dose and 400,000 people with the second dose. We carry out 2 lockdowns to contain the advance of COVID-19 and carry out a major public awareness campaign. In communication, we are being as transparent as possible about the data and actions we are taking in the city.
So let's talk about communications. What means of communication does Curitiba typically use to get out information to its citizens? Television, social media, press releases? Tell me about it.
We use all platforms to communicate, as it's a city with 2 million people, the largest in southern Brazil. We have different types of audiences. So we use each medium to communicate in different ways. In social media, which is my area, we combine current trends, which are on the rise on the internet with the information we need to pass on. We make the language a little lighter and more palpable for the population. Because when you think about a public institution, there is always the idea of something inside the box. But here we try to make access for information easier.
Great. Let's go back to when everything really started ramping up with the COVID-19 pandemic. What were your priorities when determining what information to go through your department to get out to your citizens? What were you trying to tell them?
When the pandemic started, we focused on informing people about the precautions we should take. Wear a mask, washing our hands, and not friend people, as it was something new for everyone. We are the lookout for news from around the world and spend a few days and nights answer people's questions. We held lives on Facebook to answer citizens' doubts and create a telemedicine system and a website with all the information about the pandemic, as if it were a COVID-19 center. This we developed in the beginning.
So that kind of brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was combating misinformation and positioning yourselves as a clear voice of correct information. So how did you stop the spread or try to combat incorrect information about how the virus spreads, or about testing or vaccination sites, or misinformation about the safety of vaccine or masks? How would you fight that misinformation?
It's a tough. We fight misinformation with lots of information. Almost every day we talk about virus care, recommendations for healthcare professionals, and post daily bulletins on the pandemic situation. We are currently working on a project that fights fake news, where we will gather all this false information and clarify it for the population, all in one place, one website, and all the population can access this website and all of this information.
Well, that's great to have it all in one central location where everyone can access it. I'd love to talk just a little bit more about the city of Curitiba.
Okay.
And what you saw during the pandemic, because it's really, it's one of our Smart 21 communities of the year. It's a very innovative place. Can you tell me a bit about some of Curitiba's innovations that have occurred during COVID-19?
We have innovation in our DNA. That's why Mayor Rafael Greco always says, innovation is only valid when it becomes a social process. Because of that, we create a Fab Lab, the first Fab Lab in Brazil, with 3D printers in 2019 to develop the maker culture in your city. We developed partnerships with universities, startups, and various organizations to democratize the population's access to this new public equipment. With the pandemic, we transformed this place into a face shield mask factory, an action that was considered by UNESCO one of the best examples in the world in the fight against the pandemic. The masks were destined for hospitals, for public security professionals, and also in our social action work to rescue people on the streets. There were more than 10,000 masks for those on the front lines in the fight against COVID-19. There is another great example, that is the project that we use artificial intelligence to screen patients with suspect COVID-19 in our city. But I will tell a brief story of this. In March 2017, we created the Saúde Já application, which digitized various health services and our citizens' data so that they could book medical appointments directly from their cell phones. This prepared us for the pandemic because we had the data from these people to be able to develop more effective public health actions. In partnership with the Spanish company Doctoralia, we are the first capital in Brazil to use video consultation for medical care for patients suspect of having COVID-19. They offered the structure, and we, the professionals, was a great partnership. After that, in partnership with Instituto Laura, we create the triage system through artificial intelligence platform designed to screen and monitor patients with suspect COVID-19. The system works through WhatsApp and also on official websites. Chat with artificial intelligence gathers information about the patient. If the system identifies severe symptoms, it forwards the person for assistance by phone or video conference with the teams of the municipal health department. I think the two examples is very stronger in this pandemic, what we create in this role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first one, especially 10,000 face shields that were used all around. And yeah, that's quite an innovative use of AI. And what really strikes me about that is it showed that because your community had been doing all these innovative things before the pandemic struck, you were more prepared to deal with the crisis as it came up. So I do want to take it back to communication, because we're just about out of time. We have time for one more question. Okay. So I want to bring it back to a little bit of more, what's more your expertise and your work with the community. I want to talk about your methods of communication, your strategy, things like that. Did you develop any new methods of communication with citizens as a result of everything that's happened with COVID-19 that you think is going to continue once life returns back to normal?
Yes, we realized that all the content we post somehow ends up in WhatsApp groups. Sometimes even leaving the context we enter it. So we try to insert as much information as possible into our posts. When approaching a subject, we deploy different ways and language to deliver the message. Not simple a post on social media, but also a video for WhatsApp or a complete article with all the topics on that particular subject. We intend to work even more on social media platforms. This is a very hard work nowadays. Communicating in this time of crisis, because it's hard to combat misinformation. But we learned so much in this pandemic with posting on the social media, and the immediately feedback from the people was a new school for us. We learned a lot in this pandemic.
Well, certainly, and it seems like you're listening to how people consume the messages and how they spread it with WhatsApp, and you're tweaking it accordingly. And I think that's a brilliant way to go forward. Well, Cassio, that is all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving us a little look into Curitiba.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this conversation, and bye from Curitiba for everyone.
That's right, and good luck tomorrow as we head towards our top 7 announcement.
Thank you.